I want to be sure, while I try and connect your brain together with this tonight, I want to be sure that what I mentioned as a springboard the other night about churning accounts, that at least part of it you understand. I just skimmed over it, and I was just assuming everyone had enough reading sophistication to understand. You have an account with a broker, and if you give him what amounts to economic power of attorney, that he just has full access to your account, then he can buy and sell stock without checking with you. You start off and you've got X amount of thousands of dollars in your account. Churning your account is when the broker, even though he tells you, if he checks with you or you check with him, or you see your statement at the end of each month, and just all kinds of activities. Almost every day he's buying and selling stock. Now he can tell you it's for your benefit, but churning your account, you do understand, those of you that's never fooled with that the only way that broker makes a penny off of you, the only way he makes anything is each time he buys and sells stock for you, he gets a commission. So do you see, even though he can say with a straight face, if he's any good, especially over the phone, that I'm making all these trades, I'm making all of these trades in my continuing attempt. I'm always thinking about your account among all the ones I've got. Of course, a good guy's churning everybody's account. But he's saying, I am keeping my eye on every possibility, and I'm doing all this trading for your benefit, and he is not. Now, I want you to understand that that's the only way that he makes money is by buying and selling. But at any given time, and of course the broker I'm fixing to show you, we can call it broker/life, and what life does to people, especially up here. But at any given time, looking at the broker now as life, that everybody, every human is his account, that he is churning your account, and life tells you in numerous ways, throughout all kinds of myths and religions, what seems to be common sense, and some people their gut feeling, that life has your best interest at heart. All right, at any given time, look at it this way, that life is churning everybody's account, and it's telling everybody, whether they believe it or not, that it's for their benefit, that that's why they've got them so, that why you're so active and you're always thinking, always worrying, that it's for your benefit. All right, at any given time, just as though there were a stockbroker that had full access and power of attorney to everybody's account, everybody alive on this planet, for him to say that I'm only doing all of this active trading daily for your benefit, at any given moment, there is validity to that. Because if we froze reality, then at any given moment you understand, let's say that half the accounts in the world, that is half the people in the world at one particular moment, if you looked at their account then as opposed to an hour before or the day before, and their account in the full range of the possible tropical meaning of that they could appear to be that their account is in better shape, that it is more profitable, it is worth more right now than it was yesterday. So at any given time, if you stopped reality, or if God, the great broker, life, jumped down and says, all right, I've been accused of churning accounts by a man who, I assume he'd have the decency not to point me out and embarrass me. But then if life announced to everybody, now I want to know, how many people think that all this activity, what he's calling me churning up your account, how many of you believe that it is not for your benefit? Now at any given time, you wouldn't have but at least half the people, even if they had the nerve to raise their little hand, half the people would not feel like that life was churning up their account. Because at any given time, you've got to understand, half the people have just sold stock to the other half through that broker for a profit. So half of them are going to feel that way. That for everybody that loses money on a call, somebody made some on a put. Everybody sells short, somebody makes it when they buy long, etc. So at any given time, apparently, many people, and I'm suggesting to you half, it doesn't matter, would feel as though, no, life's not churning my account right this second if they had no great memory, not much more than people are meant to have. And they would say, no, life wouldn't do that to me. My broker wouldn't do that to me. And he does a lot of, I don't make money every month, every year, but right this second, I can look down at my account. I can feel it. I am in better shape thanks to him. Now remember that. But also remember, where I was going to start actively trying to connect your attention with it tonight, is this, that in the long run, that is exactly why they came up with the term that life had, that part of its body come up with this term and the idea, the description of churning your account. over the long haul, you've got to understand, only the broker is going to benefit. And it was always his intention for him to benefit by churning your account, not you. If you accidentally, which if a guy had been churning accounts long enough and he ever paid any attention, he would understand what I just said. He'd have to know that at any given time, half of his accounts, that if right then they called and said, liquidate me and send me the money, half of them would be in better shape than they were. The other half would not. So he would know that. But that's just sort of incidental. He did not intend that. He doesn't care. The intention of churning your account is for him to benefit. Him, not you. Not half of the clients. Him. All right? Now, what appears to be, if you can follow all that and what I was pointing out the other night, what little bit I covered, churning accounts you can look at as being the disruption in your personal life, all of your concerns, all of your worries, your daydreams, and I was pointing specifically up here. That in sophisticated areas and the kind of people I'm dealing with you people, we're talking about that the primary churning of accounts is up here. The continual thinking, I should be doing this, or I shouldn't be doing that. Why did I do that? The continuing recycling of memory, daydreams of the future, that no one is pacified. Specifically up here. Now it may appear to come out in your behavior, and you may think it comes out in feelings, but if you do, you weren't listening good night before last. The primary churning that you can just immediately see is this, going on all of the time. Now from certain views you could look at this churning on life, on the basis of life itself. You could look at it as perhaps being a questionable affair. But now what I want you to try and see is that this kind of churning, now looking at life as being the ultimate, in fact the only, at that level, broker. If you're alive, you got an account. And if you got an account, life, you're a broker. There's nowhere else to go. Look down on that basis, what I want you to see, of life having everybody, all of us, as his client. And that he is churning everybody's account continually. What I want you to see is that this is a most expeditious use of the potential that he has. Most expeditious. It is a splendid division of labor. It is a admirable conservation of potential and realized resources. That is, he's got everybody's account churning. Now I'm going to run simultaneously as though we're talking about 3D life and brokers and life itself. So listen with at least 3 years. As long as he's got everybody's account churning, he has got a myriad of choices. And at any given time, remember, some of you heard this, it was not that hard to see. At any given time, if we stopped everything, half of his accounts would be in better shape than the other half. But at any given time, he is always in better shape because he is churning up every possibility. Now, if you looked at it back to the stock, at any given time, by churning every account, then everybody owns all the stock. Now, somebody over here owns AT&T, somebody over here owns some General Motors, somebody over here owns some IT&T and some General Motors. As long as he's churning everybody's account, he is making a profit because he controls it all. You understand? It doesn't matter whether you're selling AT&T over here and then buying IBM, and when have you lost money and when have you made money. As long as he's got all accounts churning, he can't lose. Do you understand? And every piece of stock, everything on the stock exchange, that is, all possible realities are being moved about. Constantly. All the time he doesn't need what's going on at IBM. But at least it is active. It is not just laying there. And if suddenly he needs something that's over in this area that I'm calling IBM, at least the stock is active. Trading is going on. For whatever reason, his attention may be drawn over here to where DuPont. And he gets all involved with something over here. All involved may be a second, a minute, an hour. And then, of course, I can't describe it really any further because we're talking about 3D reality like all of life's attention is over there, which is not. But let us say a large part of his attention is over here. But suddenly, whatever reason, I'm not going to make up any greater story. Suddenly he realizes, I have got to extract something from the world of Macintosh. And so he jumps over, and Macintosh stock is not laying there dead. There are not people now on the floor of the stock exchange trying to move, the specialist trying to move Macintosh, and nobody will deal with it. As long as he's churning everybody's account, even if he doesn't have any particular need right then for the computer biz, he knows, by churning everybody's account, he knows if suddenly, just like that, I need to do something, I need energy being transferred over in this area, he didn't have to look. As long as he's got everybody's accounts churning, all he's got to do is turn his attention, and energy, that is transactions, exchanges are going on. How could you ask for a more expeditious use of the potential energy of humanity? You don't like churning? He keeps everybody upset. He keeps everybody dancing. It's not like the one guy in the movie can come in and Black Bart or Evil Roy Slade make one guy dance there in the saloon. Life's got everybody dancing. Would you like to dance for me? Not particularly. And life takes a shot at you at an early age. And like everybody, even in the movies, the guy, the preacher, or the guy there in the bar says, well, I believe I will do a few steps. Now you put it that way. The rest of your life, the rest of your time here, life has got everybody dancing. Even if he's not looking at you, he knows, once he gets it going, that you're dancing. Looking at you now instead of looking at you individually, instead of referring to you as IBM or Macintosh stock. He knows, without looking around, that you're dancing. You're active. You're exchanging energy, even if at some level right then you're of no great consequence. You are involved with exchanging energy. It creates a huge field of possibilities that life can peruse and or pursue. Many of the exchanges, many of the stocks, to stay with my running dual metaphor here, many of the stocks drop off. They disappear from the exchange. But as long as they are on the exchange, they stay active. And that's what I meant by life has such a cornucopia of possibilities to peruse and or pursue. All of them he does not pursue. He, you people on tape, I'm meaning life. I'm not referring to God or anybody else named he. It does not have to pursue, but it may peruse it. It may turn around, and for some length of whatever time would be to life, it may watch that stock, it may look back, and every time it looks at it, it does something to it. In case you can't figure that out, it's close to quantum investigations, because life, just looking at the churning over here in this one area, it even churns it more. For those of you that sometimes wonder why you feel like you do. That's not on the menu tonight for me to go into that, but all life's got to do is look over in a certain area. It's already churning and going on. It may just glance. But everybody in that area, everybody on that floor of the stock exchange, everybody feels they don't know why. That's why they can't explain economics and movements of the stock exchange. They don't know why. It's like some sort of mass genie hits a bunch of people, and suddenly everybody in one area, either around one stock or one area of the economy, just suddenly goes into some sort of frenzy of buying or selling, or dizziness of some kind, disorientation. And what it was life just glanced around at it. And the churning even increased more. But at any rate, life can look around and peruse what's going on. It may never pursue it. As I said, sometime after that, that stock may disappear. That is, the kind of activity life had you turned up doing, either actively, that is, overtly, or up here, it loses interest. It doesn't need it. Whatever happened, it does not pursue it. And so it drops off, and it's brought up by something else. You're thrown into another specialist, to another special area. You end up representing another kind of stock. If you begin to see this, I've described it, of course, in other ways, then the kinds of negative observations, kind of criticism that people have of life in the city, 3D existence, looking at it as being a kind of babble, old ordinary intelligence from everybody, in varying ways, looks upon life as being disorganized, confrontational, ill-directed, because it seems to be such a place of bedlam. Sure, you got a few people, would say one person. Sure, we got a few people who think right, that is, they're wired up like me. But look around the rest of life. What in the world's going on? After these thousands of years, we're still not civilized. We've got people over here that still believe God's name is Allah. Or we got people over here that believe that you should only have one wife or husband. Ordinary old intelligence just looks upon life. Just at any given time, it just glances around. All you got to do is have your feet hurt a little bit, or get your new car dinged, or have a headache, and you look around and life is just coming apart. There seems to be an orchestra that everybody's got their own little score. Everybody's trying to improvise. That there's just no reasonable direction to life. But if you see what an expeditious, what an efficient use of the human mechanism life is making by churning everybody, and by there, in a sense, at any given time being the possibility of every energy exchange possible going on somewhere on the body of life via man, that anything he needs at any given time, life that is, all you got to do is look around, and somewhere, it may be a one-shot deal, but somewhere there are two poor suckers, maybe out there in the street, out of the main floor in the bathroom, exchanging stock. It may be a stock that only has one share. And that may be the only time it gets moved. That may be the end of it. That one exchange, and the guy that ended up with it may look at it and go, and throw it in the toilet. He doesn't know why, but life decided, well, I don't need that. But at any given time, life can look around, and any possible energy exchange, anything that humans can do, somebody is doing it. And yet other people in the city say, well, life, I don't know. It'll be good when the gods come back and straighten everything up and steady this out of control ship. Can you see, I've twice used the term about the expeditious use of potential, labor, resources. But before I pull it a little closer, let me be sure that you understand what I'm trying to put into words. That life can grow, life can expand, as far as you can see 3D-wise, at an optimum level of efficiency by having every possibility extant at any given time. Now, any of you that's still suffering not only from old intelligence, but maybe old and real cheap intelligence, which I can't help it, that's the way you were when you got here, you may try to say, wait a minute, there's got to be a more efficient way. And the only other thing that good old binary consciousness and intelligence could come up with is say, well, the only more efficient way, or you would have to say it best, looking at it with two eyes, all right, there would be a way that's just as efficient as life would have to know exactly what it's doing. And instead of having all this activity, all the activity would be headed toward one thing, right? You go tell life that. That wasn't big enough laugh. Here comes the real one. Tell yourself that. Because what I was going to point out after that is that it is the most efficient way. Because even life, you've got to see growth in the sense that there is a real, if there was such a thing to describe, objective future that is around the corner from wherever anything is, including life. Then by its very nature, the future is to some degree uncertain. Do you see, that's not the end of it, but that's as far as I'm going to carry in words tonight, that the most efficient use when you're looking at the fact that each given second has some uncertainty right around the corner from it, what you'd call the future. That on that basis, the most efficient use of all resources, all labor, is to continually, constantly be, or have access to, every possible fucking combination of energy exchanges, every job description that life has ever come up with. Forget the federal government and that registry. Life has got a list of every possible job that could be done. And somebody's doing it right this second. All the way from cleaning out the toilets off the stock exchange, where that one guy threw in that one piece of stock, if you want to look at that as a job, to the job of somebody sitting around saying, I hate the stock exchange. Maybe the guy just thinks it one time in his life. Who knows why? He doesn't know why. It's just something flashes on TV. And it's all about, it goes on for 20 minutes on PBS about the American economy, the makeup of the free enterprise system vis-a-vis Wall Street. And he's sort of watching, and suddenly one guy gets up and he makes a statement. He's got a red bow tie and suspenders. And he goes, blah, blah. And this one guy sitting not far in the outskirts of Omaha, in that real nice subdivision, and just one time suddenly he looks up the TV and this guy gets through, blah, blah, blah. And this one guy looks up and goes, I hate the stock exchange. And he goes back to reading. But at one time, right there, if life needed it, there was one person that right that second was doing that job. I hate the stock exchange. I hate people that make a profit. I hate anything. You see, the ordinary critics, the way life wired up, when you're thinking that your consciousness, your intelligence is just doing one little job, and you think it's for your benefit when it's for the broker's benefit, then people continue to look around and they say there should be some cohesiveness, there should be a unity of thought and direction in the human race, that this is extremely inefficient. That's why we fight. That's why we have wars. That's why we have skirmishes over borders between nations, the divisions between this and that, the membranes holding apart in here and out there, holding together ordinary consciousness. But part of life's body continues to condemn that. It does not see this very efficient. Now, I said I was going to drag it closer to you. Can you see that if you had such a similar situation, as insane as it may sound to ordinary people, but we don't have your ordinary people around, I don't think. If you had such a similar situation in you, can you see the benefit? Can you see how it could be used? You would not be limited to that great, eternal, free enterprise, all-American, planet Earth choice that you can have any flavor you want as long as it's chocolate or vanilla. What if you could churn up every account you got? Look at your accounts as being every place that your neurons can meet. Every possible intersection. What if you could churn them all to where at any given time, every possibility, forget in the world or the universe, but every possibility already extant in you is being executed. Or at least if you turn on it, it is being executed. That little particle, you didn't know it was there, but you turned to look at it, and praise be to Heisenberg, by God, there it is. How about, instead of everybody thinking, well, I'm trying to learn something really extraordinary, if all possibilities were going on at any given time? Well, you liked it, some of you, when I was talking about life doing it 5 minutes ago. What if you could arrange for your intelligence the operations of your own nervous system right up here in the 3-pound area, that at any given time it was running every possibility extant in you now? Forget about anything new, but every possibility in you now. That was a trick statement, but... And so at any given time you could check around, and instead of thinking what you're going to think, which is of course the same old thing, instead of thinking that, you turn real quick, and sure enough, can you believe that there's somebody, 2 guys in the bathroom up here, right off the main floor, and that stock meant so little to me, that is that idea, that thought, that I only issued 1 share, and it just changed hands. Now it may be the end of it with you. You may never think it again. In other words, it may apparently have no long-range possible profit to you. But at any given time, if you had everything being churned, if you had every possibility available in you, that the exchanges were going on, or at least when you looked at them. They fired off. Doesn't sound interesting? It couldn't be any more bedlam than is in you now. Of course, that's a trick statement too, because that kind of bedlam, if it's induced apparently by you, it's not bedlam. In fact, it makes the churning of accounts that you're normally familiar with. Compared to that, it seems like what the Zens and the meditating folks all believe in. It's almost calm. It's almost as though you're above the stock exchange behind a great plate glass and you can see it all going on. It's like an intercom. You can mash a button, you can hear it. But if you don't hear it, in a sense you don't hear it. You know it's there and you can hear a little noise. If you could, in the sense I'm putting it, churn your own account, it's no longer the same sensation that you have a life churning your account. For one thing, if you churn your own account, you don't ever churn your account in any way that upsets you. And I'm just telling you this the way it is. I ain't going to try to tell you why or how. It never does anything that frightens you, such as, oh my God, I shouldn't have sold that stock. That'll come back to haunt me. In my old age, this could ruin me. And you don't ever lose money, because you don't start out with any money. If you don't look at it that way, you're not gambling anything. Of course, nobody else is gambling anything anyway, but they just think they are. But when you start off and you start a whole new game and you get above this level and you start churning the account, it's like a play account. It's like, in a sense, that you've taken 5 or 6-year-old kids and you said, hey, let's play stock exchange, and these little slips of paper I'll give you will like those are 5 shares of IBM and this are 5 shares of... It's like that. You can play. You can lose. But you didn't lose anything. It was just play. I didn't really mean to get into that, but I did, so I'm going to have to tell you this. It's a strange game, though, because if you win, you do win. But if you lose, you don't lose. Let me see if I can get some of you to connect that with something else. A variation of something I brought up last week. All power is ad hoc. And you forget that at your absolute revolutionary peril. I have pointed out to you, I pointed out and have not dwelt on it because it is slippery. But power is for the sake of it being exercised. But it is for the sake of it being exercised, and to be exercised for a particular reason at what would appear to be a particular time. After that, there's nothing you can say if you could see it. There's no comment to make. Power is not something laying out there. Power, you can also look at, those of you who can understand it in the right way, is a kind of domination. That there is a dance going on continually between what seems to be two parties. In here, out there on large scales. But power is not something that somebody has. It's not something that some institution has. Now, ordinary consciousness thinks that. They would see the king, the president, the chief of police of your little city. You would say that he or she has power, and they do not. They simply do not. Nobody has power. Power is the exercise of life growing. And there are people that vis-a-vis you and any other you in the world, that there is apparently someone who has the potential, who has the ability to exercise power, that is domination over you in some particular area at some particular time. And then that's when you say, you and everybody else, well, he has power. You cannot fool around with him. But what you're saying is, under certain conditions, at certain times, he would dominate you dancing with him. But it's not him. Power has never been able to undergo any decent post-mortem, or even vetus mortem, if there was such a thing. It can't be described. People cannot talk about it. There's been many books written about it, and people discuss it. People argue about it. People apparently are engaged in revolutions, real revolutions out there in the streets, on the basis of we won't take power away from that guy. He is misusing it. And there's no guy in the world that has any power. It is always ad hoc, and the ad hoc can be momentarily. It can be a split second. That is, to you. But you could be in widely held company. When I say that to you at one time the king has power, that doesn't mean that everybody in your state might not say, all right, he's got power. But the only time it's of any consequence, the only time that it is exercised, is in some ad hoc situation. Such as the king goes rolling by and you go, hey, king. All right, right then, chances are, he's going to exercise the power. Or if he simply calls you in for some reason, that you're behind in your taxes. You haven't sent him your youngest daughter yet. Whatever it is, he can call you in, and right then, he is exercising power, but it is ad hoc. The rest of the time, I'm just going to put it to you straight. You don't think about it. That's the way it appears, but why don't you think about it? Because it's not being exercised. Now, if you are still stuck with that old cheap, in-town, ordinary old intelligence, you can say, yeah, but it's always there. And I say, so what? It's always snowing somewhere. Lightning is probably hitting somebody on this planet right now. So what? Is it hitting you? Well, no. Yeah, but it's there. Power is always ad hoc. Now, believe it or not, I'm about to try and make you see that this is an area that is not exercised, has never even been seen within the human nervous system. But all that wasn't, as those of you who have been around over 2 or 3 hours know, had nothing to do with affairs out here. It does. If you could turn up your own account, you would understand that. But the whole idea that there is captivity, that you are in prison economically, politically, and that somebody has got their foot on your throat, or some institution, or some government, would just show what a captive you are of old intelligence. You're not a captive of some conquering army or some tyrant. You're a captive of old intelligence, because there is no such thing. There is the power that is necessary for a life to execute, for it to grow. The same thing is true in you. Where do you think the idea of will came from? The whole idea that there is any inequity, that some people are smarter than others, some people are stronger than others, some people are more talented than others. From some view, all of that could be true enough. But all that is a form of domination. All that is a form of ad hoc domination in some particular way. Because anybody that's smarter than you, you stand there and dance, or anybody's got more money than you, anybody's apparently got more power than you, all they got to do is just wait just a second, somebody will cut in, and you'll watch. This macho, banker, king, guys with plumes in his hair, spiked boots, guns, and he's dancing like this and pushing you around, and somebody taps him on the shoulder, and you look around, and suddenly he's in drag, and he's going backwards. Because there's always somebody richer, there's always somebody stronger, there's always somebody taller. In other words, what I just told you, all power is ad hoc. It does not rest in people. It does not rest in things. It rests in growth. Let me give you, I like this. I think this would qualify to some of you right in the beginning. I don't know what I do. This would really qualify as a form of circumlocution, or whether it is just plain out obtuse. But I like it, and if I like it, I'm going to say it. That's not true. That's not the basis. If I like it and think anybody might hear it. Don't forget, I've changed the subject completely, right? Okay. The rest of that you people work on. I just saw this one time, and I wanted to bring it up. Out of several examples, this is an easy one. Does everyone realize, let's take the Christian, well, the Judaic Christian. Get two groups of you. Holy Writ, the Bible, Old and New, parts. You do know that it has been edited, been a bunch of versions. The Protestants, I assume the still most popular version is known as the King James Version, and people all over the world just, it rolls off their tongue. Give me the good old King James Version. They got no idea what it means. And there have been, in recent times, even more translations. Not just translations literally, but new versions. Considered by many people. Now don't just stay with the Bible. We can look at this. It's true with other parts of life's body, other people, but just remember that. Turn up your account. Don't just focus on the Bible, because that's not the point. This is just an example. It's just a great one, though, if you can hold on until I get to the punchline here in a second. Like, there have been all of these different versions. There have been wars apparently fought over them. Kings setting up whole committees and telling them, you come up with a version I like, or it's... Of course, they knew that. For every new version that's come out, there has been a large cry from a sizable area of life's body somewhere that goes, no, boy, they have really fucked up the Word of God. You know, boy, Larry's going to get those guys someday. All right, all of you got to know that. You've got to be that as well read as I am on this stuff. Constantly new versions coming out in our lifetime, but it's been going on for thousands of years. Constant criticism as soon as it gets through. And what has the criticism been? Not just specifically, well, I don't like the way it sounds, or these new versions, when it's been put into Southern California ease, it doesn't sound as good as the good old King James poetic sounding version. Not just that. They always get around to this also. Some critic somewhere, a theologian, just a writer, a poet, that may not even be religious. But the criticism will ultimately drag in the fact that what can we expect? The king, some church, some denomination set up a committee of people, of humans, and they sat down and decided which books, which writings should be included and which should be considered apocryphal. If they're going to do a revision of it, this committee, can you believe this? That this church, this pope, this rabbi, this publisher, this king, appointed a committee of people, and they went off for 2 or 3 years using our money, but they went off and they decided what the word of the gods should now be. A committee. Now, the punchline. Not one time have one of these critics, as literate as many of them's been, as vociferous and as public, not one of those critics, after having denounced committees, is not always, usually they'll throw in, is not only being ill-appropriate for any decent product to be produced, but especially something like this, to turn it over to a committee. Not one of those people has life ever driven to say, even if you get some other people saying, well, you're right, that is not a job for a committee. Not one person's ever stood up and said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll take on the job single-handedly myself. You got to turn the tape over. All right. If I have to say it, which obviously I'm about to, I do want you to understand that was just one example that I could have made up others. Except this actually happens. But I want you to see that it has nothing, or the benefit is not having to do with the Bible, with actually what happened. Because remember, the people didn't do this. Life did this through people. But notice, I just picked the Bible because to city consciousness, that would appear to be something if you took it seriously. If we're talking to people that took that sort of thing seriously at the old intelligence level, that here was the gods at one time speaking directly to humans. And we've reached such a sorry state that you'd make those noises in public. We've reached such a sorry state that now the king, or our religion, has decided we should update. That's the reason I picked it. Other things, setting up committees to study poverty, education. You should know this. I've even twisted around and used it for other maps in the past, trying to show you that organizations and committees never fulfill their stated purpose. That's the way life is arranged. And simultaneously, even though I was not here to act as some sort of critic, you've got to understand that there are plenty of critics that attack everything. You know that. It's part of life's body. It's the churning of all possible accounts going on. And so there are people everywhere. That was just one example that I thought would get, at least in the city, it would get plenty of attention. That, yeah, there is something to be absolutely condemned. If not morally or religiously, just on the basis of almost insanity. To take a bunch of people, humans, just ordinary people, as intelligent and educated as they may be, and they're going back with something as beautiful, if it was not actually the words of God. So poetically beautiful, like the King James Version is it. They shouldn't have fooled around with that. Because people that say that, they don't know what was before that. That was just a version, just to suit a king, just to suit a time. It was the exercise of his power ad hocly. They voted, the committee, which books to leave out. You can go buy them. That's no big secret. The books have been left out, the lost books, the apocryphal. It's books that they read, and they decide, well, it doesn't fit, or I don't like the way it sounds. You can imagine sitting around swapping votes, and they say, well, all right, I'll vote to leave in Daniel if you'll, kick out, the book of Aphad or Fred or whoever it is. All right. Still the point being, remember, this has got nothing to do with books, got nothing to do with guides, but life is wired up to where parts of its body roundly, intelligently, in a way that gathers support, condemns, works done by committee. And the person who does it never is driven, even when other people say, you're right, that was a hell of a job. Not only does he not offer his services as a solo act, it never comes up. Anybody that hears him and agrees, well, you're right, we should not have turned this over to committee. And they all go. Nobody ever says, well, why don't you take on the job by yourself? Now they may say, you're right. Why don't you take on the job and get some people that think like you to help? And he might go, well, I will. And that will be only a few seconds after roundly condemning in print and speech, working up a crowd that we cannot have committees taking over important jobs, working on the Holy Scriptures, or working on something having to do with the health of our children, the welfare of our communities. Committees are just, they'll never get anywhere. What we've got to have is somebody in control. We've got to have the exercise of power going on. Somebody knows what they're doing. And maybe everybody in the sound of his voice goes, I couldn't agree more. Yes, 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 yes. Never in the history of man does that person then say, and I know the person to do it, me. He might say, and I know the person to set up the new committee to straighten this out. I humbly present my services if you want me to head up a new, or at least an ad hoc committee to get the ball rolling until we set up a permanent committee to undo this. Surely that's sufficient for my example. As always, while I apparently can verbally, or if not with my gestures, engage in hyperbole, you realize I'm not exaggerating when I say that never has it been done? Now ask yourself, what is going on? That life makes people here and there that may garner attention, that may stand up and roundly condemn committees. Now they can go under other names, but surely you know what I'm talking about. Committees deciding things, important stuff, all the way from what is going to actually be the words of God. I don't know anymore. I used to think the King James Version, and now my church says, hey, forget that, here's the new version. And it sounds like my hippy-dippy cousin talking. But the church says so. The church, not one guy, the church, the committee that the church appointed. All the way from that to them saying, all right, this is the way you people should run your schools. This is the way we should distribute the tax money to help the needy. Who decided that? That Blue Ribbon Committee. All right, life is arranged that way. That no one, hardly, remember I pointed out some months back, seems to want to or can or do work solo. But at the same time, life has parts of its body continually running alongside these committees, throwing rocks and spitting at them throughout history, and pointing out, oftentimes in very reasonable, literate, captious manners, that committees working on jobs like this is not the proper approach. And many people will go. That's the end of it. Oh, like I said, they'll set up another committee, but that's the end of that. If you wait, now I pointed out, look through history. That's why I said that you can look at it as exaggeration, but it's not. That'll arise, and the one guy that apparently saw through the fallacious facade of appointing a group of people, a gang of people to decide something important, the guy who denounces it, points out the folly of it, and gets the Senate, gets the court to agree, he never says, all right, I'll take it. Since I see through it and since I see the problem, I'll take it on. Nor does the court, nor does the king. The throne ever turn on him and say, well, since you seem to be the one to realize that, I want you personally, no committee, no nothing, I want you to take it over. But I like the first part, is why I want to point your attention, the guy who can see it. Life makes him a running critic of a committee. And he denounces it to the point that other people are wired up to applaud him and say, hear, hear. Never is such a man then says, well, I only see one immediate treatment, one approach. I'll personally, if you want me to, I'll personally retranslate the whole Bible. And I'll do it right. Never. I lied to you when I said I changed the subject. I didn't change the subject. The exercise of power is always ad hoc. Life is not normally arranged for any individual to volunteer himself to do a solo exercise of power. I thought more of you'd hear it. I'm going to rephrase it, obviously. Nobody volunteers to undertake a job by themselves. Now, any of you who are just stumbling into this the first few times, you're going to have to get beyond what appears to be psychological commentaries on the nature of life, because that's not what I'm making. There is no psychological, as it's called, reason for this. Now, I could stand here and run the same kind of verbal byplay on you and describe, well, people are shy, people don't want to take responsibility, and blah, blah, blah. I know all that, and I'm not even going to bother to go through it. I'm telling you, life is chemically, electrically, biophysically arranged in such a way, and it's for life's benefit, that things are not wired up ordinarily. For one guy to stand up, or one person, one woman, and say, well, here's an area that I think could be improved, and some of the other little cells, some of the other neural connections around them go, here, here, and if you don't mind, I'll see if I can't do it. Bravo, right on, here, here, cheer, cheer. It does not happen. You know why, ordinarily? Because at our observable level, it is more efficient to have committees operating. Even though life continually has its part of its own neural system running alongside the committees, laughing at it, poking at it, condemning it. That's part of it, because the ones who condemn it the next day are part of a new committee to overthrow this committee, to undo what it did. Life is not arranged. It is not the most efficient the way things are now, the way things that you can observe in the 3D universe. For one person to stand up, not only point out that something could be improved here. If the purpose of such and such is supposed to be so-and-so, and everybody goes, yeah, the other neural connection will go, yeah, then I say that what you've come up with is not the most efficient way, and I base that on blah, blah, blah. And some of the connections go, huh, that makes a lot of sense to me. How about you, Fred? And it's Fred, yeah. And it says, well, if you'd like to, I'll see if I can't do it that way. And they say, hey, do it. You got it. You check with us. Does not happen. Now, some months ago, as I reminded, and some of you nodded, I was pointing out, and that I started from a slightly different basis that night, that people, and I was pointing out that apparently, at that time, if you recall, I was drawing you a springboard of a kind of metonymus picture of it being a progression of people at one time working physically, materially, out by themselves, like having to hunt, raise crops. But it's reached the point now that nobody actually works solo. Now, can you take it, what I'm talking about tonight, to another level that nobody thinks solo? Life is not arranged. That is not the most efficient way. What if life made you actually the operational, useful genius that you believed you were before you met me, and had a whole new definition of insanity, genius. It's a joke. What if life did make you a fount, a reservoir, a cache of real insight and intelligence? And while it was looking off, wondering what happened to IBM stock, and why is CBS going downhill, a truck hits you. That is not a good division of labor. That is not a good conservation of possible resources. So instead of one person knowing a whole lot of stuff that life might need, it takes this, if knowledge was some stuff that it's going to need along the line. It's like playing Julia Child, and it chops it up into little teeny-weeny pieces, and it just runs it through everybody's nervous system. So at any given time, it's churning everybody up. It is on that basis that you do not find one person staying up in life. And even at times that they apparently do, and I know that you could pick out, I could do it, that historically back at city level, old intelligence level, we could point out there seems to be a few people in history that did apparently almost operate by themselves. Of course, the further away they were, the easier it is to say that. You know, that Alexander the Great must have been a hell of a guy. He didn't ask anybody's opinion. He just did what he wanted. You know, that's the further you go back, the easier that is to say. And the only basis you got to go on is a piece of fiction to start with. Well, at any rate, you should see what I'm saying. Life is not wired up, regardless of what your own intelligence might tell you about some historical figures. All you got to do is be able to look into your own nervous system and see the better history, not the written history, not what you picked up from the kind of graffiti and tales that you picked up in college and out in the city, but to look in your own nervous system and realize individuals do not stand up in life. They're not frightened. They're not psychologically crippled. Life is not arranged that way. For a person to stand up and say, this could be done better, and everybody says, well, if it can, you do it. And the person says, okay, if you want me to, I'll give it a shot. No. It says it could be done better. And if a bunch of them say, well, how so? You say, well, give me some of you come help me, and I'll show you. And so some of them say, all right. Maybe some of them say, all right, we will. Maybe some of them say, it's too much trouble, and that's the end of it. Old intelligence never sees individual, apparently independent thought, independent exercise of power just within yourself. It never sees that. It never even crosses its mind as being an alternative. In the same way that no committee, the people of any state at any time, once they heard the criticism, even the king, when he heard somebody come into court, you people are getting to where you can run these metaphors fast enough. I'm talking about two things at once, right? That a guy comes into court and he says, something could be done better. And I point out to you, the king, not only does the guy never volunteer to say, I will individually undertake it, because committees are not the way to do it. And I point that out to you, and the king goes, yeah, you did, you convinced me. All right, it should be one person. The king says, all right, you also got me there. The guy says, I'll try it if nobody else wants to. Not only does that not happen, it never apparently comes from out there. That is, the king never says, well, you convinced me the committee is not the way that we should have done that. Would you head up a new group to undo that thing? And the guy might say, all right. Never even out there does a suggestion arise. In you, the suggestion has never arisen. Not because of some weakness on your part, not because of some trauma, not because of some psychological shortfall in your brain. Things are not wired up to where even your people ever turn to who appears to be in you a critic. Never says, hey, well, since you got life figured out, since you've made fun of everything that we've ever thought about and that ever goes on out there, how come you won't personally take over and lead us out of Egypt into the promised land? And your potential Moses always goes, well, all right, give me the resources and give me a few people to help. In other words, let me set up a committee and I'll get us out of here. It does that all the time in your people. Even out in your people, nobody ever says, wait a minute, we've been through this sham God knows how many times. You know, you pull this on me once a day. Aren't you? You're the same guy. You keep changing your name. Either that or he uses the same name every day. He says Moses, and he knows that you got such a memory that you go to bed and you get the next day and he pulls the same shit on you and you go, all right, I will. No, the human nervous system is not wired up. Although it says I, although people believe that you're an individual, although people believe and feel and then think that there is an end to me. This great organ of my skin, it stops, my opinions stop somewhere and then becomes you, especially when you disagree with me. which you do. Of course, ordinary people think, well, there's a mistake there. They don't understand that all accounts are being churned. In the nervous system itself, it is not wired up for any individual to see an ad hoc exercise of power. That is, in your case, we're not talking about anything else, but in your case, it never seizes the possibility an individual exercise of power. Some independent, solo act in you to go, all right, I'll give it a shot. Never arises. Not only is this not possible, of course, ordinary people, but it's one of the things that, to any great degree, I got to point to, your life doesn't even really churn up, because it doesn't even arise that, to any serious degree, that they go, well, that is your populace talking to your critic at any particular moment. Well, look, you're right. We seem to be so splintered in here. That is a committee. And you seem to see so clearly that, hey, you can hide behind the skirt of a whole church, a whole nation, a whole epoch of history, but hey, I can see right through it. You're people. When you're saying that, when you seem to be the critic, you're people. It never arose the possibility of saying, well, look, not sarcastic, grateful, hopeful. They never say, well, look, we keep falling into that, but since you see it so clearly, would you now, we won't interfere, would you take on the job of redoing the Bible and get it right this time? What ends up, does anybody remember good old General Fabius? Used to be referred to as the kind of approach that was militarily, where they used more Fabian tactics. That is, instead of a direct confrontation, the Fabian tactics taken from him, if I remember my old history, if I remember the use of his name, that rather than confrontation, rather than actually coming into even contact with the enemy, General Fabius, I guess his stock in trade was S&E, stalling and evasion. And how the term came about, whatever the war was, the final battle, but there were more than one, now I think about it, that he continually would win, but it'd take a long time. He would just wear the other people out by continually stalling, by threatening to attack and then not attack, by making them think he was going to show up, and he wouldn't show up. And he would just wear them down, they'd give up, they'd die, they'd go home. And so he was looked at as sort of a victor, but even at an early time, they began to make references like, well, what you've had, I think it was even during his lifetime, well, I can assure you it was, but they began to say to somebody else, well, what you've done here is you had a Fabian victory. Can anybody see that from a certain view, the reason that came to mind is that would appear to be the other alternative that people exercise internally? You don't see the connection? All right, I'll get crude again. Yes, I've had it. I'm going to quit drinking. Where's the number of that place where you can go join a club that will help you quit drinking? Now, I want the one that lets you, drink while you're there at the first meeting, until you can work yourself into it. How does that sound? That doesn't sound like a Fabian tactic? I'll wear out my taste for drinking, or my temper. I'll keep stalling around. I'll threaten it. I'll make it think that, hey, I'm going to do something about my temper, or I'm going to do something about my drinking. I'll scare the hell out of my drinking. And if I keep threatening, I bet I'll wear it out. Finally, whatever this demon is that makes me want to drink, he'll go, Jesus, this ain't worth it. Right? Does it work? And it never arises that there might be some way that you could exercise power. But if this was brought out to ordinary intelligence, it again looks at the matter. Those of you that recall this one the other night, some of you got a glimpse. In the city, they insist that the only success is total success, and the only success they ever have is some success. You remember I told you it was a mathematical, it's an equation, but it runs into at least the fifth dimension, and I can't pull it out for you. But I'm not going to try anymore. So, they insist, they will do this verbally, that, all right, what I got to do is totally clean up my act. Just drinking is part of it. I got to change, I guess a good term nowadays, a workable term, would be my whole lifestyle. I'm getting too old for this. Life's getting too dangerous. I got to straighten myself up. What they're doing is leaving it as they should with a committee. That is, all right, All right, first off, I'm going to start doing this. I don't know if I can quit drinking. If I can find that number, I'm going to join that club. Or I'm going to go down, I'm going to go see what they do. But at least I'm going to cut down. And after I cut down, I'll need to do that a few weeks, maybe a month. I'm going to start exercising. In other words, here, you got a committee going on. Yes, I'm going to change my life. And suddenly it has become a whole thing, well, this is going to be a lifetime proposition. And you got to do it a step at a time. Is that not a committee? Can't you just see them all deciding, well, what books actually came from God? Which words? One guy over here saying, well, I don't think God actually said this. Somebody says, yeah, but this old guy, Daniel or Jehoshaphat or somebody, he said that God told him. And the guy at the end of the table says, he could say anything. And then the guy here says, well, why the book you're working on? How come you believe that guy talked to God? Well, I can tell. Does that sound anything like, well, I'm going to change? Are you sure? Yeah. Well, I'm going to do it this way. That won't work. Well, I heard it worked. Out of that committee never comes anybody saying, why don't somebody take charge? Is there anybody around who would actually just single-handedly take on the responsibility of this? They don't even ask. They don't say, will anybody do it and guarantee success? They don't ever ask, will anybody take on the job? The exercise of power being ad hoc is beyond the pale of ordinary intelligence comprehension. Therefore, they believe if I had any power, it would be all-encompassing, it would be omnipresent. That is, if I could change, it'd be all change. You understand? That's the beauty of it. And so things do not get radically moved about. Everybody keeps churning. Your account does not go from one bank to another because we only got one bank here. There's only one game. But I like the term, since they made up on Wall Street, it suits it if you're going to follow my little picturization now. Each person's account is churned. It's like you're in the same place, but it just keeps this activity going. It doesn't move, really, because you can't get out of it. You can't get off the floor of the stock exchange. You can't get out of the game. You can't get out of the room. But it keeps you churned up. And the question never arises, the possibility never arises, that there might be an exercise of power possible, but it would be ad hoc. For this purpose. What purpose? Whatever purpose it is you're talking about. Whatever it is that right now you think, I should do so-and-so. Done. Or at least somebody say, all right, I'll take it. And they don't come back with some report, well, I couldn't get the committee to work out. They wouldn't show up. The neural system of the human brain is not wired up in that way. It would be less than efficient as things now stand. Because that one neural connection could get shot. Could be shorted out. Could be hit by a baseball. You could fall down the stairs. Your account stays churning the same little exchanges over and over, and the possible exercise of ad hoc power for some specific reason that would appear to be independent for you, for the sake of your own account, it never even arises. Oh, let's talk. They talk about it. But it never arises. It is never actually executed. That kind of ad hoc power. Tell you again the joke. I keep using this. You know, the guy says, doctor, you need to help me. It hurts when I do this. And the doctor says, well, don't do that. You know, that used to get a laugh. Now we'll go beyond the punchline. He said, it hurts when I do this. And the doctor says, don't do that. Now what would be the ordinary neurals of the hoi polloi, the middle class of life? Not only, of course, that actually happened to you, you wouldn't laugh, you'd think it was insanity. But the thing is well, that's not it. Now what if the doctor says, well, all right, you're saying that it hurts when you do that. And you say, yeah. You say, all right, does it hurt now? And you go, no. And you say, well, my prescription was don't do that. And you go, yeah, but you don't understand. No, what you're saying is my committee hurts. What you're saying is I hurt being alive. But remember what I also told you? It would be good vocational advice. Don't go to your employer and complain about the whole company. Because what can they do with that? Or if you're in a sexual relationship with somebody, and you just tell them one time or several times, but you tell them, hey, you're driving me nuts. And you don't give me anything specific. What's your employer? What's your sexual partner? What can you do with that? It makes it sound as though there's nothing you can do. I hate being alive. I hate this job. I hate everything about my relationship with you. When it might be that, well, I hate 2 or 3 little things you do. But if you just say, I just hate it. I just can't stand this. What are you going to do with that? There is no ad hoc exercise of power. How much?
8:12.
Well, all right. Let me leave you with something. There's no one of these little... Oh, you people, especially out of town, but some of you have done it here. But I want to say, and I'll get little notes from some of you when you first get involved with this, or from out of town, and you write a little note, and the gist of it comes out about that this is just so much fun. You might tell me a little something else, but a lot of times when these letters from your people or people I never met out of town will say stuff like, almost in closing, when that was the whole purpose. It was like, how much fun this is. Any of you who feel that you've got in some way to apologize for that, or that you've got to write a whole letter just to put, God, this is fun. Don't. Because you're closer to the reality of it at the times when you just feel like that, boy, is this fun. Or put it another way, you haven't really begun to taste this until it hits you, forget anything else about where the hell I came from or what this is all about or where it's going, until it hits you that Jesus, everything considered, everything about life, from the physical to the emotional, just everything about me being alive, this is more fun than I ever had in my life. Until you reach that point. And I said, literally, more fun. Not more educational, more enlightening, more spiritual, until you feel, until it begins to hit you. I don't mean that's the end of it, but until it hits you good that this is more fun than I ever had in my life. Especially with my clothes on, as they used to say. Until it hits you, you're not really in this. And so don't hesitate. Anytime if you just want to write and say, God, this is more fun than I've ever had, I'd be glad to hear it. Now what I wanted to say, huh? Okay. I'm just going to leave you one little thing, since I pulled one on science fiction the other night. Consider this a little neural excursion. And I'm not asking for you to give a report to me. But I saw another piece one time of a movie, else I'm making it up. And right quick, here was the part that I want to pull out. And it was a science fiction movie. It starts off... All right, I guess I'm going to have to make it up. No, I saw it, a piece of it. It's contemporary times, and there's a scientist. You're the scientist. And at some time in the past, 20 years ago, you did some experiment, and you're fooling around with a machine that was fooling around with time or something, and you had a bunch of people somewhere, and they fell in, they disappeared. You're fooling around with trying to build a time warp machine or something, and this little group of people just disappeared. And since you work for the government, it didn't actually ruin your reputation. You're still at work. So, but here it is, 20 years later. Here it is 20 years later, and now something strange is going on in the world. And suddenly you run across somebody that disappeared 20 years ago, and you and the person recognize each other. And so you talk a little while, and you figured out that now something's funny going on with the atmosphere of the planet Earth, or there's beginning to be tremors in the planet. And now you understand that because of you sucking these people through this time thing that you didn't actually mean to do, and here's one of them, that what you did back then is now having ramifications that could be deadly to the planet. And so by your little talk to this guy, you get all this piece together. And you decide, well, something's got to be done. Because then you realize, all right, if I could have stopped that experiment just before I pushed the final switch, if somebody that had been there, if they'd pushed this other switch, then what I'd done would not have caused that 20 years ago. And so he stumbles around and he manages to send this guy back 20 years. And then he manages to bring him back again. Follow me. So he comes back again and he said, did you mash that button? The guy said, I can't find it. He said, but while I was there, I talked to them. You're talking about 20 years ago. And they said that one of the guys that disappeared with me does show back up. And he pushes that button. All right, so here you're still the scientist right now. And the Earth has really begun to shake. And it may be going out of orbit. And so you say, all right, so the guy they said that came back and pushed the button, you know who he is? He said, yeah, he's one of the ones that disappeared with me. He was here in this time with me 20 years ahead, but I hadn't seen him in a few years. We got split up. All right, there you sit, and you're considered, and at least in this movie, you're the smartest guy in this whole scenario. So here you are. Now, here's what I want to ask you. He went back and he said that this one guy that's up here wandering around somewhere in the present does go back and push the button. But now it's getting dangerous. The planet's really shaking. Here's what I'm asking you. You being the smart one, would you go out immediately Would you announce in whatever government agencies and you personally to help immediately, to go out and to find that guy, since you're the only one that can send him back, to send him back, one, or since you're still here, 20 years later, obviously, some way, the sucker gets back and pushes that button, right? Obviously, you wouldn't be here. That's second. Or third. Now listen to me. I'm fixing to cut the tape. The third possibility, and this is the third one, would you have no choice? We got to cut the tape. Think about it later if you got to. Say it to yourself. The three possibilities. Would you go out immediately, since it could depend upon the history of everybody, to go out and find that one guy? He's the only guy, according to the one that came back and told you. He's the only guy that can push the right button and do it so that things do not fall apart here. Would you go out and find him? Or would you realize, well, hey, somebody's going to find him. Some way or the other, somebody's going to find him and bring him here, because as witnessed by the fact we're still here. So that means that some way he got back and undid it. Or third. See, if you were just still fooling around with old Chief Two Eyes, you'd think, well, that's the only two possibilities. The third one is, would you have no choice? No, I do.